Welcome to Value Added, the real estate podcast where we speak with the brightest minds in the world of real estate who provide, create, and realize value in an ever-changing market. If you're a real estate professional delivering value to your clients, an investor creating value not seen by others, or a busy professional who passively invests in real estate to grow the value of their hard-earned dollar, then you're in the right place. And now your host, Nick Walters.
Hey gang, welcome to another episode of Value Added, the real estate podcast. On today's episode, we have Travis Watts. Travis is the Director of Investor Relations with Ashcroft Capital, a New York City-based multifamily investment firm with approximately 8,500 units under management with a valuation of close to $1 billion. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Travis Watts, welcome to the show. Good to have you.
Hey, Nick. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Tell the listeners a little bit more about you and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, crazy story. I'll share with you kind of a unique point of view. I really don't do this a lot on podcasts, but I don't know. I was just thinking about how crazy my story has become over the years. So I started out really as an entrepreneur, a 16-year-old detailing cars, doing lawn mowing, doing all these odd job things. And I ended up working for Walt Disney World out in Orlando. And then from there, I decided to go to college for live show production and audio engineering. And I just wanted to tour. I wanted to travel. That was kind of, at the time where my head was at. And went up to New York City, did an internship. I was an audio designer on a couple off-Broadway shows. And then I thought, this really isn't for me. I don't really like this. It's not what I thought it was. I wish I would have maybe shadowed some people doing this before I had decided to go to college for it. So from there, had a couple seeds planted early on in my life about real estate and passive income in general through the Rich Dad books and through my own dad, who was investing in single family. And I knew I wanted to get there someday. I didn't know how or when. And so this was 2009, and taking a look around at the economic landscape. And the one thing going for 2009, if you had a little bit of money, was that real estate was on sale. And so that's where I got my start in the single family space. 2009 was my first property. It was a 2-bed, 1-bath condo. And first, I just moved into it. There was a government tax credit to be a first-time home buyer during that time. Moved in, house hacked it, did some experimental stuff with that home. Ended up making it a full-time rental over time. And then I did all kinds of single-family stuff. I did fix and flips. I did buy and holds. I did vacation rentals. I did all this stuff. Meanwhile, working a high income job in the oil field. I was doing that specifically, not because I love the oil field, as I'm sure a lot of people aren't so fanatic about that industry for those reasons, but it paid well and it allowed me to get more and more real estate under my belt during, a very good time in Colorado anyway, all up and down the Front Range. So ended up building myself a little side job in single family, which I never intended to do. And it was quickly about to become a full-time job. And I didn't have the time to dedicate to it. I had almost zero spare time, and I wanted to be career focused because that's really where the money was at for me at the time. And so I had to discover passive investing for the first time. And what that really meant, I had to get some mentors. I had to get a lot more education. I had to listen to podcasts, read books, join real estate meetups, go to seminars. I really just embraced the education space again, probably 10 times harder than I had before. And that's where I learned about syndications, apartment syndications specifically, and how to actually be a hands-off investor. And in 2015 to 2016, I sold all my single family homes and I just went 100% in the direction of passive investing. And that was a big game changer. So since then, it's been, some crazy times, but it's given me a lot of what I refer to as time freedom, the ability to do what you want with your time. And that's meant a lot of different things to me over the past 5, 6 years. But it's exciting. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
What is the glaring difference between actively managing single family homes and passively investing in
Mhm.
multifamily commercial real estate?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I fell in love with real estate. I got to see firsthand all the benefits, the tax advantages, and all the ins and outs of owning real estate. What I didn't enjoy, this was a lot of self-reflection, was managing the tenants and having to put together my own team and having to drive neighborhoods looking for properties and getting outbid on different projects and frustrated with that, and trying to find good CPAs to work with. The whole thing was really, I mean, it's a business. It's really a business. And in my head, I had thought, hey, one day I want to have 50 or 100 single family homes. That's like my goal. Well, not even 20% to the least of those goals, and I'm already burning out and thinking, holy cow, man, it's a full-time job. I can't handle it. So to answer your question, it's all about your time. Some people thoroughly enjoy that process. They love working with people and with tenants, or maybe they're handy. They like fixing up houses and working on them. I don't. I absolutely hate doing that stuff. And so everything I was doing, I was having to contract it out, and I ended up having property managers at the end, and the whole thing was just a disaster for me. So passive's all about the folks that are wanting to spend their time on something else, but realize that real estate can be a great asset to be in. You don't just have to be in the stock market, for example.
So let's dig into your passive investing. You coined the term time freedom. Explain to us what time freedom is from a passive investing standpoint.
Time freedom, I mean, just reverse it, is the freedom of your time. So it's the ability to do what you want, when you want, as much as you want with your time. What's behind that, the technical definition, is basically when you have enough passive income to where you can more than pay for your lifestyle expenses, your rent and your insurance and your cell phone, your food, then you now have the freedom over your time. You don't have to be chained to a desk. You don't have to do the 9 to 5. You can now choose. Maybe you want to be a part-time employee. Maybe you want to be a consultant, launch your own business, open a charity, travel the world. I mean, everybody has their own things that they would do if, money wasn't the primary objective. And so that's really what I was able to create, and, what I help educate other people on, and to show them how they can also create the same thing in their own life.
You initially were introduced to Ashcroft Capital through a mutual friend, I believe. Talk about how your relationship with Ashcroft Capital started.
Yeah, good question. So again, back in 2015, 2016, when I was making this big leap to syndications, I had enough education to just be dangerous. Basically, I knew enough to get started, but I didn't fully understand all the ins and outs and the inner workings and the behind the scenes of how this stuff works. So did a couple deals early on with some local syndication groups who, I knew them personally as just individual people in my local, market. And I really liked them, and I still do today. I really do. But the fact was, they didn't have really any track record or any experience doing the syndication stuff. They may have gone to a couple seminars or something, or had maybe a mentor, and they were very green, very new. So turned out, they're essentially gambling with my money. It was all just hopes and dreams. And so while they did buy in really strong markets, and they did buy at really good prices, and the deals themselves and the markets were great, the group just lacked the experience to actually execute the business plan. So what ended up happening is a deal that should have been a 5 to 7 year deal ended up being an 18-month deal. They had to sell it because that was the only way we were going to get our money back with a little bit of a profit, and exit the deal. It would have been a lot worse to hold on to it in those circumstances. That really taught me a lot, how important a team is. And so I took out a sheet. I can't remember if it was an Excel sheet or I wrote this down, but I started writing down criteria. What's important to me in a syndication? What am I going to look for in a team? And everything I had put down on paper Coincidentally, in the same general time frame, one of my friends introduced me to Joe Fairless, co-founder of Ashcroft Capital. And turns out I was talking to Joe on the phone, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for this. Well, they basically checked all the boxes. It was everything I was looking for in a group. So I was still a little hesitant, skeptical. I did one deal with them as a limited partner. That led to 2, that led to 3, that led to 4. So I'm in like 9 of their deals today as a limited partner. And they're just one group out there in the space, obviously, right? It's not that I invest solely with them or exclusively with them, but they've just been a great group in my own experience. My wife's an investor with them. My dad's an investor with them. It's just been a really good fit for a lot of people. So I was kind of already, flaunting the company a little bit in my own network, people that would ask, what do you do? And, I would be sharing this anyway. And I got the idea that, I love going to conferences and networking events and all this kind of stuff. And I reached out to Joe on like I took out my phone and I just made this little video one day. It was like on a Saturday morning. And I was like, hey, Joe, this is Travis, one of your investors. I just wanted to say I'm very appreciative of what you guys do, for these specific reasons. And if there's anything I can do to add value, to you guys or to Ashcroft or whatever, just let me know. Here's kind of my rundown of my skill set. Again, keeping in mind I kind of had this time freedom, to take on something like that. And he replied like an hour later and said, oh man, thank you so much for that video. That was so nice and thoughtful, but we really don't have anything right now that we can offer you. And so I was all deflated, I shouldn't have had high hopes for that. And about 2 or 3 months later, Joe circled back and said, we're opening up an investor relations role. And, I was reading through the description, and it's like travels around to networking events, travels to conferences, networks with other people to explain passive investing. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's like 100% what I want to do. I mean, there's nothing more I'd rather spend my time doing than that right there. So I applied, and that's kind of how I got in the gate with Ashcroft, is first being an investor and just the alignment of interest, and then that method. That's how it came to be.
What are you guys doing now to not only retain your current investor roster, but attract new money, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, deal flow overall, just in the industry, has come to a huge slowdown. It's not absent right now. There's still deals happening. However, leading up to this, Ashcroft was doing, let's say, a new deal every couple months or something like that. And now it's, who knows, but it might be one in the 6-month period. I don't know, but it's definitely slowed down. Now, 2 things are kind of the case with Ashcroft. One is that we already have a lot of existing investors. We've got a huge database, most of which are probably kind of a bit on the sidelines. And I would include myself in that too. Just kind of let's wait and see how rent collections go and things like that. It's only been, at the time of this talk right here, what, a month and a half or something like that. So we're still kind of early on, and, we have things on the horizon like a pending recession, and, we'll see what happens. That being said, there's also, I guess I would call it maybe a little pent up demand for some investments that have less volatility. So a lot of people that kind of got wrecked in March on the stock market, for example, might say, we've recovered a lot of that, not 100%, but a lot of it. And I'm pulling some money out of that because I don't like that type of volatility. I want to put it in something a little more stable, that distributes some cash flow or something. So it's not just an equity play. So kind of a mixed bag, so just taking it, one deal at a time, having to work with the sellers, asking for, in some cases, some extensions, or maybe some discounts here and there. It just depends on the deal. But right now there seems to be enough demand to keep going, but at a slower pace. So we'll see when things start to open up, kind of how that looks. But obviously what I do, which is a lot of conferences and in-person events, are kind of off the table right now. So here I am talking to you on a podcast. That's what I'm doing.
What is the number one piece of information you're trying to convey to somebody that you're talking to at a conference or a networking event with regards to investing passively in commercial real estate?
Good question. I like to just try to be a resource for anybody, even if we're not talking about syndications. I'm on calls weekly. I just have like a Calendly link. You know, people set up 15-minute calls with me. I talk to 20-year-olds that have read some of my blog content that say, "Hey, you used to do house hacking. You know, I'm looking at doing that. How do I get started?" Or, you know, "I'm interested in fix and flip." So I'm just trying to be a resource and say, you know, this book really helped me. You know, you might look into attending a seminar like this one that's kind of dedicated to what you're wanting to learn, or these are kind of the key players in that space or whatever. So when I'm talking to somebody about, you know, passive investing and syndications, what I'm really trying to figure out is what their goals and objectives are, what their risk tolerance is, and more importantly, are they focused on some type of career that they're passionate about and that they love, or are they trying to escape that reality, which was more of my story. I had a high paying job that I ultimately wanted out of. A lot of people are, you know, doctors, dentists, lawyers, attorneys, athletes, whatever. They love what they do. They're not going to quit. They're not trying to not be a doctor. You know, they want to park some capital somewhere in a hands-off way with an experienced team to have some residual cash flow, you know, just some extra income on the side. So it's really just a back and forth Q&A type of thing where if I can add value or give them a free resource, I will. But more importantly, trying to figure out if that is actually maybe the correct thing for them. Obviously their decision, but that's what we're trying to uncover.
Have we had enough runway here the last 60 days to get a good picture as to how coronavirus has affected the mindset or the expectations of a passive investor?
That's a good question. I think that so the mindset is skewed week to week, right? It kind of depends on kind of what the media is picking up, what people's general perceptions are. Are we going to have a cure? Are we not? You know, what's the Fed going to do? All these things are just ever evolving. I think at this point we recognize that, you know, value add multifamily, or let's just call it affordable housing sectors, a bit more sheltered from some of the economic things happening, more so than, let's say, office or retail or the airlines or just the stock market in general. So I think that's become a little more clear to individuals that maybe this is a place where I could take some out of the more volatile stuff and put it into something a little more consistent and stable. Yeah, I personally, I still want to give it like another month or two just to really kind of feel out, you know, how these rent collections are going. Is it starting to get worse? Is it starting to get better? We're only a month and a half in, and we don't even have a clear indication this month of rent collections. So I think it just depends on the individual. Some people are just gung-ho and ready to roll. They're just waiting on deals. Others are, nope, absolutely not. You know, I'm not touching this anything for 6 months or whatever it is. So
Has the investor profile changed? Meaning investors that are looking to pull the trigger now, do they have a little bit more risk appetite? Are the more conservative investors looking to stay on the sidelines a little bit longer as we kind of let coronavirus run its course?
I think so. I think that's kind of, you hit the nail on the head there. So everybody has their own risk tolerance. I mean, there's clearly people out there that'll take loans out and sell their house and go put it all into Bitcoin, right? In the hopes that that's going to go up 100% overnight. I mean, there's people with that kind of appetite, right? This is what like Las Vegas is full of, right? And I see myself as being way more conservative than that. I'm not as conservative as saying all I'll buy is like CDs and bonds and treasuries. I'm not taking it to that extreme, but you know, I'm somewhere in the middle, but maybe a little more towards the conservative side. So yeah, you see that playing out for sure in the folks that are subscribing to deals in today's environment.
Let's go ahead and move on to the hard hitting questions. These are the questions that I ask every one of our guests. What is your why?
I'd say my why is to give back to others. Number one, I do that mostly through giving my time away for free. And like I said earlier, trying to be a resource for people. Secondarily, I want to make sure that my own family and my wife and, you know, hopefully our future kids have the ability to do what we want with our time. And one of our huge passions is traveling the world. outside coronavirus land. So hopefully we get back to doing that. And I want to ensure, that's a big part of my why and why I do what I do. And I think at the end of the day, it's to have a less stressful life. So I don't want to be worried about what the stock market's doing. I don't want to be worried about what if I lose my job? Are we going to lose our house? I don't want to put myself in those situations. So I try to invest in things that perform in good markets and bad markets, that are somewhat recession resistant. And specifically, I focus on cash flow to have multiple income streams in case one of those dries up or disappears.
Besides your alarm clock, what gets you out of bed every morning?
Oh, I don't use an alarm clock very much. Quick side note on that, it's kind of funny. I did a 23andMe DNA test, and it told me in there, your body should naturally wake up at 8:20 a.m. And that's like clockwork. That's the weirdest thing. I don't know how they know that. If anyone else has taken those tests, that's crazy. But anyway, what gets me creative projects of any type. A podcast like this, I look forward to. I get energized thinking about, sharing this stuff with other people, writing a blog post or an article on a topic that I'm passionate about. Sometimes it's just off the wall stuff. A few weeks ago, I did like a canvas art painting. I haven't done one of those in like a decade. It's kind of crazy for me, but it was very expressive, and it just helped me stay creative. So just having something lined up that I can be creative with, that's what gets me up.
What's one book you've read recently that has significantly impacted your life?
Oh man. Oh, there's so many. Man, I'm reading right now the Hands-Off Investor by Brian Burke that just came out like a week ago. That's a really good one in relation to what we're talking about on this call. Tony Robbins, I'm taking another one of his programs, motivational, coach, speaker, mentor. Awaken the Giant Within has changed my life, continues to change my life. I read that book about every 5 years or so, and it's just crazy how your life changes, and then now you can apply the same principles to what's going on today, and it's like reading a new book every 5 years. It's crazy. So those are two.
How do you like to blow off steam?
Oh man, so I like to get outside. Again, we're in quarantine land, but any chance we can, whether exercise, walking, whatever. My wife and I have been doing this crazy like push-up competition. I wouldn't call it really competition, but it's like 50 push-ups a day minimum, 100 max, and we're trying to do that for a set amount of time and kind of just measure those results and see how we can do without having a gym to operate in right now. So that certainly helps, man. That'll wipe you out if you're not used to doing that stuff.
How do you pay it forward?
Like we talked about, I mean, we do charity events, things like that. And, sometimes we'll give, money to certain causes and stuff, but mostly week to week, if I really look at this from a macro level, it's giving away my time to people. I mean, it's a really big commitment. I don't know if many people realize how much of a commitment that is, but when you're booked up just week to week, talking to everybody about everything, and you're not doing it for profit, you're not being a consultant or a coaching program, you're just doing it because you enjoy doing it and you like helping people. That's really how I give back mostly.
Finally, how can our listeners learn a little bit more about you?
Sure. Email is probably the best. I'm on there all the time. So travis@ashcroftcapital.com. Also, I'm on Bigger Pockets. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram at Passive Investor Tips. So yeah, feel free to follow me on social media as well. And I just love connecting. So definitely reach out no matter, if you're accredited, non-accredited, want to be passive, want a house hack, as I said, I'm here to be a resource for anybody and everybody that I can.
Travis Watts, that's a wrap. Thanks for adding your value today.
You bet. Thanks so much for having me, Nick.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave a rating and a review, which will help us introduce the podcast to other listeners. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which will give you access to other episodes you may have missed. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week.